The Terran Defense Force vessel, resilient, hung motionless against the backdrop of the Carina Nebula, its titanium alloy hull reflecting the purple and blue gases that painted the void. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the bridge's observation window, her stocky frame betraying her upbringing on a heavy-gravity colony world. The ship's sensors had detected something unusual, quantum fluctuations that shouldn't exist in natural space. "Contact, bearing 035. Lieutenant Rodriguez called out, his fingers dancing across the holographic display. "It's big, Captain. Really big." Before Chen could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. A massive vessel emerged, its surface gleaming like liquid mercury. But something was wrong. The ship's elegant lines were marred by damage, its hull pockmarked with impacts that had somehow pierced what looked like advanced energy shielding. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," Communications Officer Park announced, her eyes widening. "It's singing?" The bridge filled with a haunting melody that somehow conveyed pure desperation. As the crew listened, the sounds gradually shifted, transforming into words. "To any sentient species, we are the Lumini Collective. Our pursuers come. They consume all. We believed ourselves advanced, but our technology fails. Please, even primitive assistance would be welcome." Chen's jaw tightened, another advanced species calling humans primitive. But something in that song's speech struck her genuine fear. Real desperation. "Show me these pursuers," she ordered. As if on cue, 3 more ships emerged from quantum space. They'd moved wrong. Mechanical precision mixed with organic fluidity. Their hulls seemed to be constantly shifting, adapting, learning. The hunters, the Lumini transmission continued, panic now evident in the musical tones. They integrate all technology they encounter. Our energy weapons are useless. They adapt too quickly. We did not think to maintain physical defenses, believing them obsolete. Now we pay the price. Chen smiled. Physical defenses. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways. "All hands to battle stations," she commanded. "And get me fleet command. Tell them we've got first contact under fire." The response was immediate. Within minutes, 5 more human vessels dropped out of FTL, their massive forms dwarfed by the alien ships, but bristling with what most advanced species considered obsolete: rail guns, missile pods, and thick armor plating. "Lumini vessel," Chen broadcast. "This is Captain Chen of the TDF Resilient. We're what you might call primitives, but we've got some old-fashioned solutions to your very modern problem. Request permission to demonstrate." There was a pause, then the musical response came. "Your vessels. They are so solid, so physical. Can they truly stand against such advanced hunters?" Chen's smile widened. "Let's find out. All ships, combat formation Delta. Load tungsten penetrators. Let's show them why humanity never gave up on kinetic weapons." The human ships moved with practiced precision, spreading out to create multiple firing angles. The hunter vessels, seemingly confused by the primitive formation, began to adjust their energy shields designed to reflect and absorb energy weapons. Fire. Thousands of tungsten rods accelerated to near-relativistic speeds erupted from the human vessels. The hunters' adaptive shields, expecting energy attacks, did nothing to stop solid metal moving at appreciable fractions of light speed. 3 massive explosions lit up space as the rods tore through their targets. "Impossible," the Lumini transmission sang. "Their shields. How did you?" "Sometimes," Chen replied, watching the hunter ships trying to adapt. "Being primitive isn't such a bad thing. Now let's get you somewhere safe. We've got a lot to teach each other about the benefits of keeping some old-fashioned tricks in our arsenal." As the remains of the hunter vessels drifted in space, Chen couldn't help but think about humanity's place in the galaxy. Maybe being called primitive wasn't an insult after all. Maybe it just meant they remembered lessons that others had forgotten. The Lumini ship's next transmission held a different tone, not the condescension of before, but something like wonder, perhaps Perhaps we have much to learn from Earth's children after all. Chen nodded to herself. First contact could have gone worse. At least they'd made one hell of a first impression. Helm, set course for Earth. Let's show our new friends what other primitive solutions we've kept around. The Resilience cargo bay dwarfed the Lumini delegation. Their crystalline forms, barely 4 feet tall, floated inches above the deck plates despite the ship's artificial gravity. Captain Chen watched as Chief Engineer Marcus Walsh demonstrated what the aliens had dismissed as crude metallurgy. This, Walsh said, hefting a chunk of metal that would have been impossible to lift in Earth normal gravity, is our latest composite armor. We call it Damascus Eye. The metal surface rippled with complex patterns, layers upon layers of different alloys folded together countless times. The Lumini ambassador, who had introduced himself as Song of Morning Light, emanated confusion in waves of purple bioluminescence. But it is dead matter. How can it adapt? How can it learn? Walsh grinned, his scarred hands running along the metal surface. It doesn't need to. That's the beauty of it. Your energy weapons need to adapt because they're fighting against other energy weapons. This, he rapped his knuckles against the armor. This just needs to be tough. Before the ambassador could respond, the ship's alert klaxons blared. Chen's communicator crackled. Captain to the bridge. Multiple hunter signatures detected. The Lumini's crystalline form pulsed with fear-red light. They found us. They always find us. Chen was already moving. Ambassador, you might want to see this. Follow me to the bridge. As they rushed through the corridors, she contacted the bridge. Status report. 5 hunter vessels, Captain. Bigger than the last ones. They're different. More mechanical than before. They reached the bridge just as the hunter ships came into visual range. Chen's breath caught. These weren't the sleek predators they'd faced before. These were walking tanks, mechanical monstrosities that seemed to be built from scavenged technology of a dozen different species. They've adapted. Song of Morning Light sang mournfully. They always adapt. Your kinetic weapons might not work the same way, Chen finished, but that's why we never rely on just one approach. Walsh, what's the composition of their new armor? The engineer, who had followed them to the bridge, was already analyzing the sensor data. Multiple layers, Captain. Energy dispersal systems, quantum field generators, but wait. He leaned closer to his display. The base layer, its physical armor. They learned from last time. Chen smiled. So they think they've adapted to our tricks. Hamilton, load the phase-shifted penetrators. The what? Song of Morning Light's form rippled with curiosity. Something we developed for dealing with layer armor, Walsh explained. The penetrator changes its crystalline structure as it impacts each layer. Old tech, new application. The hunter ships moved into attack formation, their weapons charging with ominous purpose. Energy beams lashed out, testing the human fleet's defenses. The Damascus Eye armor held, dispersing the energy across its layered surface. All ships, coordinate fire on my mark, Chen commanded. Target their joint sections. Walsh was right. They're using physical armor now, but they had to sacrifice mobility to do it. Let's make them regret that choice. The human fleet moved with practiced precision, each ship targeting a specific weak point. The phase-shifted penetrators launched, their surfaces morphing as they struck the hunters' defenses. Where regular kinetic rounds might have bounced off, these burrowed through, their structure changing to exploit each layer's weaknesses. Song of Morning Light watched in fascination as the first hunter ship's armor failed catastrophically, its layered defenses peeling away like an onion. Your weapons, they are not primitive at all, are they? No, Chen replied, watching as her fleet methodically dismantled the hunter ships. We just never forgot the basics. All this fancy energy weapon tech, quantum fields, adaptive shields. They're all built on fundamental physical principles. We kept studying those principles while other species rushed to the next big thing. The battle was over quickly. The hunters, for all their adapted defenses, hadn't counted on humanity's own adaptability. They had prepared for the simple kinetic rounds from their last encounter, not understanding that humanity's primitive technology was anything but stagnant. As the debris of the hunter ships cooled in the void, Song of Morning Light turned to Chen. We have been incorrect in our assessment of human technology. We saw physical materials as a stepping stone to energy constructs. But you took those materials to heights we never imagined. Walsh patted the bulkhead affectionately. That's because we never saw it as a competition between physical and energy tech. Everything in the universe is physical at its core. We just figured out how to make the physical do what everyone else uses energy for. Chen nodded. And that's why we're still here. The hunters adapt to beat whatever they face, but they're always looking for the next evolution. We humans, we take what works and make it work better. As she watched her crew begin damage assessments, Chen couldn't help but feel proud. Humanity might not have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but they understood their tools in ways other species had forgotten. Sometimes, the weight of steel was worth more than all the energy weapons in the universe. The emergency alert blared through the resilience corridors moments after the ship dropped out of FTL. Chief Engineer Walsh's voice crackled over the intercom. Breach in engineering. They were waiting for us. Hunter boarding parties. Captain Chen's muscles tensed as she processed the implications. Somehow, the hunters had anticipated their exit point from FTL. More concerning was their new tactic, direct boarding instead of ship-to-ship combat. All combat teams to engineering. Ambassador, stay here where it's safe. Song of Morning Light's crystalline form pulsed with anxiety. Captain, the hunters, they don't usually attempt physical combat. This is unprecedented. They're learning, Chen replied, checking the combat webbing on her suit. But so do we. Lieutenant Rodriguez, you have the bridge. The resilience corridors felt different under emergency lighting. Chen moved quickly, her heavy worlder frame easily handling the magnetic combat boots. Behind her, a squad of Marines matched her pace, their own enhanced physiques evident in their fluid movements. They found engineering in chaos. The hunter boarding parties had breached through 2 points, their biomechanical forms a horrifying fusion of organic tissue and scavenged technology. They moved with inhuman grace in the low-gravity environment they created around themselves. They've locally neutralized our artificial gravity, Walsh reported from behind a barricade. Our weapons still work, but movement is compromised. Chen watched as several regular crew members struggled to maneuver in 0G, but then she smiled. The hunters had made a critical mistake. All heavy worlders, front and center, she commanded. Everyone else, provide covering fire. 10 crew members moved forward, including Walsh. Like Chen, they all came from colonies with gravity significantly higher than Earth normal. Their bodies were built for forces that would crush most humans, let alone the hunters' delicate biomechanical forms. They think 0G gives them an advantage, Chen explained, watching the hunters drift with artificial precision. Let's show them why that's wrong. Walsh, what's the structural integrity of that bulkhead? The engineer grinned. Solid enough, Captain. Damascus E, all the way. Perfect. Heavy team, anchor, and pivot maneuvers, just like the drills. What happened next was a lesson in physics and evolution. The heavy worlders used their magnetic boots to anchor themselves, then unleashed the full power of their gravity-adapted muscles. In normal gravity, they had to constantly hold back. In 0G, they were unleashed. Chen led the charge, using her body's natural strength to launch herself off the bulkhead. A hunter tried to dodge, its movements precise and calculated. But it hadn't evolved on a world that tried to crush its inhabitants daily. Chen's armored shoulder struck the biomechanical being with force that would have shattered concrete. The hunter's adaptive armor, designed to handle energy weapons and void combat, crumpled under raw physical power it had never been programmed to expect. Around her, the other heavy worlders engaged in similar displays of devastating strength. Walsh used a piece of torn deck plating as an improvised shield, the metal proving more than capable of withstanding the hunter's energy weapons. With each impact, he advanced, his muscles easily controlling his momentum in ways the hunter's computers couldn't predict. "They're adapting," someone shouted. Indeed, the remaining hunters were already modifying their tactics, trying to stay out of reach. "That's the problem with relying on adaptation," Chen called back, using a hunter's own momentum to slam it into another. "Sometimes you don't have time to evolve." The battle for engineering lasted less than 15 minutes. When it was over, the deck was littered with disabled hunter units, their biomechanical systems unable to compensate for the raw physical punishment they'd endured. As the gravity slowly returned to normal, Song of Morning Light drifted into engineering, having disobeyed the order to stay on the bridge. The ambassador's crystalline form flickered with multiple colors: awe, fear, and something like revelation. "Your bodies," the ambassador sang softly. "They are not just crude matter, are they? They are masterpieces of adaptation." Walsh helped a fellow heavy worlder reset a dislocated shoulder, an occupational hazard of unleashing their full strength. "We evolved on a world that wants to kill us," he explained. "Gravity's the most constant enemy we've ever had. Everything else is just practice." Chen nodded, surveying the aftermath. "The hunters adapt quickly, but they're adapting to what they know. They've never faced a species that was forged by a hostile world for billions of years." "Your strength," Song of Morning Light observed, "it comes from what most would consider a disadvantage, a cruel planetary gravity that should have stunted your development." "That's humanity for you," Chen replied, helping Walsh collect hunter components for analysis. "We don't just survive our disadvantages, we turn them into weapons. These hunters want to learn about physical combat. Fine, let them learn why Earth's gravity, well, isn't a weakness. It's our greatest teacher." As cleanup began, Chen couldn't help but wonder what other lessons humanity might teach the galaxy. They were called Deathworlders, primitives, creatures of crude matter. But maybe, she thought, watching her heavy worlder crew efficiently restore order to engineering, that's exactly why they were going to win this fight. The tactical display showed a stream of civilian ships fleeing the Lumini colony world, hundreds of crystalline vessels carrying millions of refugees. Behind them, a massive hunter fleet emerged from quantum space, their ships now a terrifying hybrid of stolen technologies. "They're targeting the slowest ships first," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with anger. "The ones carrying the most children." Captain Chen watched as the hunters methodically picked off stragglers from the refugee fleet. The Lumini ships, beautiful but functionally fragile, offered no resistance. They hadn't built weapons into their civilian vessels, believing warfare to be beyond their enlightened civilization. "How many ships do we have in range?" Chen asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be enough. "Just us and the Damascus," Walsh replied from his engineering station. "The rest of the fleet is still 2 hours out." Song of Morning Light's crystalline form pulsed with deep blues of despair. "Captain, there are too many hunter vessels. Your 2 ships cannot stand against their fleet. We should focus on evacuating the command vessels." "No." Chen's response was immediate and firm. "We're not sacrificing civilians to save the leadership. But they carry our genetic archives, our cultural databases. And those children carry your future." Chen straightened her uniform. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, plot an intercept course. Walsh, how much power can you give to the shields?" The engineer's fingers danced across his console. "If we reroute from non-essential systems, maybe 150%. But Captain, even with reinforced shields, we can't survive their combined firepower." "We don't need to survive," Chen replied. "We just need to last long enough." She opened a channel to the Damascus. "Captain Rivera, are you seeing this?" "Affirmative," came the response. "Ready to follow your lead, Sarah. Just like Proxima Centauri." Chen smiled grimly. "Just like Proxima Centauri. All hands, battle stations. Prepare for combat deployment of the Aegis Protocol. Song of Morning Light's form flickered with confusion. Aegis Protocol. Instead of answering, Chen broadcast on all frequencies. Attention Lumini vessels. This is Captain Chen of the TDF Resilient. Form your ships into clusters. Put your fastest vessels in the center of each group, slowest on the outside. When we give the signal, all clusters accelerate to maximum speed. The Lumini ships began to move, their formations shifting like schools of crystalline fish. The hunters, seeing their prey reorganizing, accelerated their attack. Now, Walsh. The engineer slammed his hand down on a sequence of commands. The Resilient's hull began to change, panels shifting and extending. What had looked like standard armor plating transformed into massive shield projectors. Damascus, execute Aegis formation. The two human ships moved to flank the refugee fleet, their modified hulls now generating massive energy fields. But unlike standard shields designed to protect individual ships, these fields expanded outward, creating a massive protective corridor. Physical shield projectors, Walsh explained to the astonished Lumini ambassador. We learned from your energy technology, but we built it our way. Solid matter manipulated to channel and project energy on a massive scale. The hunter ships opened fire, their combined weapons enough to vaporize a small moon. The shield corridor absorbed the first salvos, the Damascus eye armor channeling and dispersing the energy across its layered surface. Shields at 80% and dropping, Rodriguez reported. Hull temperature rising. Chen nodded. Hold position. Just give them time to run. Chen nodded. Hold position. Just give them time to run. Through the view screen, they watched as cluster after cluster of Lumini ships accelerated through the protective corridor. The hunters, frustrated by the unexpected defense, began to adapt their weapons. But each adaptation meant a pause in their attack. Precious seconds bought with human ingenuity and determination. Shields at 40%, Rodriguez called out. The Damascus reports similar status. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Walsh added. We're venting atmosphere to maintain cooling. Song of Morning Light's form pulsed with a new color, one Chen hadn't seen before. You're sacrificing yourselves. For people you barely know. That's what shields do, Chen replied, gripping her command chair as the ship shuddered. They take the hits so others don't have to. Humanity learned that lesson early. The strong protect the weak. Not because it's tactically sound, but because it's right. Last refugee cluster is away, Rodriguez reported. Shields at 15%. Chen allowed herself a small smile. All hands, prepare for emergency FTL. Let's show these hunters one last trick. The two human ships, their hulls glowing from absorbed energy, suddenly cut their shield projections. The hunters, their weapons already firing, couldn't adjust in time. Their energy beams passed through empty space as the Resilient and Damascus executed a micro-jump, reappearing behind the hunter fleet. All batteries fire. The human ships unleashed their full arsenal, their physical weapons tearing into the unprepared rear of the hunter formation. By the time the hunters could turn to respond, the refugee fleet was safely away, and the human vessels had disappeared into FTL. Hours later, after they'd regrouped with the refugees at the rally point, Song of Morning Light approached Chen in the damaged bridge. Our histories, the ambassador sang softly, speak of advanced civilizations as those who have moved beyond physical form, beyond the need for weapons and defenses. But today you showed us something different. Your physical forms, your primitive technology, they are not limitations. They are expressions of something we had forgotten. And what's that? Chen asked, reviewing damage reports. That true advancement isn't about abandoning the physical. It's about remembering why we build shields in the first place, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The combined fleet hung in orbit around Earth, a testament to how quickly the galaxy could change. Crystalline Lumini ships floated alongside human vessels of steel and composite armor. The remnants of a dozen other civilizations that had fled the hunters had joined them, each bringing their own unique technologies and perspectives. Captain Chen stood in the Resilience main briefing room, now crowded with representatives from every allied species. The tactical display showed what their long-range scouts had confirmed. The largest hunter fleet ever assembled was approaching Earth. "They've adapted to everything we've thrown at them," Walsh reported, his hands still bandaged from emergency repairs. "Energy weapons, kinetic rounds, even our heavy worlder combat tactics. This time, they're coming prepared." Song of Morning Light, now Earth's official Lumini ambassador, pulsed with determination. "Then we must adapt faster." The hunters believe themselves to be the ultimate evolutionary force in the galaxy, but they have never faced a true coalition like this. Chen nodded, studying the tactical displays. The hunter fleet was massive, each ship a unique combination of stolen technologies. They had learned from every defeat, incorporated every successful strategy used against them. But that gave Chen an idea. "That's their weakness," she said suddenly. Every alien representative turned to face her. "The hunters adapt by taking what works and discarding what doesn't. But they don't truly understand what they steal. They just use it." "Explain," requested the Meridian representative, his gaseous form swirling with interest. Chen gestured to the assembled aliens. "Look at us." The Lumini mastered energy manipulation. The Meridians perfected quantum mechanics. The Forge-born created living metal. Humans, we kept studying the basics that everyone else thought they'd moved beyond. None of us are perfect, but we all understand our strengths in ways the hunters never will. She moved to the tactical display. "The hunters think they've adapted to all our weapons, but they've never faced them all at once, used in ways only their original creators could devise." Understanding rippled through the assembled representatives. The next hours were spent in intense planning, each species contributing not just their technology, but their deep understanding of fundamental principles the hunters had only copied. When the hunter fleet arrived, they found Earth's orbit filled with what appeared to be a disorganized mix of different species vessels. Their scans showed familiar weapons and defenses, nothing they hadn't adapted to before. They were wrong. The battle began with Lumini energy beams striking hunter shields. But these weren't standard energy weapons. They were guided by human targeting systems through Meridian quantum corridors, their power amplified by Forge-born living metal conduits. When the hunters adapted their shields, they found themselves defending against one combination, while three more hit them from different vectors. Human kinetic weapons launched through Lumini energy fields, their impacts synchronized with Meridian probability waves to strike at precisely the right moment in quantum spacetime. Forge-born living metal merged with human Damascus-E armor, creating adaptive physical defenses that the hunters couldn't predict. "They're trying to adapt," Rodriguez reported from his station, watching the hunter fleet's desperate attempts to counter each new combination. "But their adaptations are conflicting with each other. They can't handle all these interactions simultaneously." Chen watched as the hunter ships began to falter. Their hybrid technologies, copied but never truly understood, began working against each other. A shield adaptation that worked against Lumini energy weapons made them vulnerable to human kinetic rounds. Protection against physical impacts left gaps in their quantum defenses. "That's the difference between copying and understanding," Walsh said, watching the battle unfold. "They took our technologies but never grasped the principles behind them. Never understood why each species developed them the way they did." The hunter fleet's formation began to break apart. Ships that had adapted in different ways found their systems incompatible, their stolen technologies unable to work together coherently. The combined fleet pressed their advantage, each species' weapons and defenses working in harmony because their users understood not just how they worked, but why they had been developed that way. As the last hunter ships were destroyed or fled, Song of Morning Light approached Chen. "We called you primitives," the ambassador sang softly. "We thought we had moved beyond physical limitations, beyond the need to understand the fundamental forces we had mastered. The hunters thought they could simply take what worked and become invincible. But that's not how evolution really works, Chen replied. True adaptation isn't just about copying what works. It's about understanding why it works, about building on foundations until you create something new, something better. She looked out at the combined fleet, where ships of crystal, metal, living matter, and quantum energy flew together in formation. Maybe that's humanity's real gift to the galaxy. Not our physical strength or our primitive technology, but our reminder that you can't skip steps in evolution. You have to understand where you came from to know where you're going. The victory celebration lasted for days, with each species contributing their own traditions to the festivities. But more importantly, they began sharing knowledge, not just technology, but understanding. The Lumini learned why physical defenses still mattered. Humans studied energy manipulation from first principles up. Each species found that they had something to teach and something to learn. And if the hunters ever returned, they would find more than just a collection of different technologies waiting for them. They would face species that had learned to combine their strengths while respecting their differences, who understood that true evolution meant growing together without losing what made each of them unique. As Chen watched Earth rotate below, she smiled. Humanity had been called primitive, called Deathworlders, called crude. But in the end, those limitations had helped save the galaxy. Not bad for a bunch of primitives who never forgot where they came from.